All right, we're back. Episode 171, Kennedy Financial. Just the two of us tonight, as you can see. Yours truly, along with Mike from Rethinking the Dollar. Mike, your return guest. Thank you so much for coming back on Kennedy Financial.
Phil, I appreciate you having me on again, my friend. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on your program. So thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
Well, as I said in the pre-interview, congratulations to you on how your channel has blown up over the last year, up to 20,000 subscribers. I know people love your positive message that you're bringing to them every night. You're based in the Detroit area. You've been talking a lot lately about what's going on with General Motors, how it affects the Detroit economy, how the U.S. auto market potentially affects the entire country. Here's some of the photos that you've been taking, or the backdrop of some of the videos you've been taking. You pointing there to this is what the average American really doesn't see, and most people have never been to Detroit, but that's what the downtown area looks like. Here's a recent shot of you standing in front of one of their facilities talking about salary and job cuts and things. So kind of get us started. You've been talking about this a lot recently. Why do you think General Motors is important, and why is the U.S. auto market important, and why is Detroit kind of a bellwether of things to potentially come for the rest of us?
All right. Well, good question. And first of all, before I get into that, thank you for those kind words prior to introduction. But as far as GM's concerned, just the bedrock and the foundation, to my knowledge, of this country has been based upon manufacturing. And so we've all witnessed over all of my adulthood life, for the most part, manufacturing has dwindled down to where, I have in Detroit several hundred vacant real estate buildings, aka warehouses that used to be either suppliers to General Motors and Ford and Chrysler, or some type of employer of a sector that was linked directly to the manufacturing industry. And so for me personally, what's more touching is driving through my city is probably you can't go a mile in any direction for the most part without actually seeing some type of facility that's empty. And of course, you know what happens when buildings stay vacant for too long, they get vandalized. And so now we have warehouses with no windows in them, no doors in them. So it looks really bad just from a standpoint of ruining the image and the look of a neighborhood. Nevertheless, just an indicator of where our city's currently at in regards to the main street. But yet, as far as you look on the news, you'll hear nothing about the true side effects of having lost thousands of jobs to, various reasons. We have everything being moved overseas. We got automation coming. So there's multiple reasons why, if you want to point the blame, you probably use a trade deal. But over the last several decades, Detroit has been hollowed out to where the population is not what it used to be. Therefore, the city itself is not as vibrant and thriving as it was back in my childhood years. So it's becoming of importance to me because, when I hear news about GM laying off thousands of employees in a very slow manner throughout this year, roughly, and I read some about 8,000 employees this year alone as probably like a beginning phase. That's just one manufacturer, and we're Motor City capital of the world, supposedly. And so if that's, the label we've been given for decades now, that's coming to an end or has already ended. And so I did that video in regards to where Detroit goes, the nation goes, just because we're all in this together. No matter what part of the country you're in, whether you're West Coast, East Coast, there's a big three manufacturing facility or tier supplier in your neighborhood or in your city that ships things here or vice versa. And so wherever this city goes, that will also impact employment in your neighborhood, as well as all the other sectors that are linked to manufacturing. And so we're all in this together at the end of the day. And so when one company makes a major announcement, there's no way that it cannot come back to impact those that may think they have nothing to do with the automotive sector. So it's just the signs of the times, and it's where this country's going. But yet, nevertheless, it's just not isolated here in this country. It's for the most part all over the world, because they're also making cuts over in Europe and everywhere else. So it's just more signs of the times where this whole picture and how all this is lining up, and it's not looking pretty for a lot of people.
I wanted to have Eric Peters join us tonight, and in the advertisements, I'm sure a lot of people noticed that Eric is an expert when it comes to automotive vehicles, whether it be foreign makes or U.S. models. And he also has a keen understanding of how government rules and regulations affect automotive manufacturers. And so I thought the two of you would be great together in terms of going back and forth to really kind of help the audience understand, how is it that we got here? Did government potentially have this effect in terms of emission standards and things like that. But we'll go back more to your wheelhouse. In terms of these jobs, how many what did they say that they're going to lose over the next year? Like 4,500 jobs, something to that effect?
So it sounds like, from all the news I've gathered via articles as well as just watching the news, it sounds like there's going to be phases, but yet the ultimate goal for this year, I read in the most recent article I posted in the last video, was about 8,000 salary workers within this country here in the next year. So between now and the December timeframe, they're expected to lay off about 8,000 salary workers. And then on the executive level, they're going to shave off about 25% of their executives around the world. And so that's a very large number. And then if you look even deeper in those articles, they mentioned something about total over the last, including maybe last year, this year, maybe what they have planned for the future. I want to say that number was close to 15,000 total, which, of their workforce. I don't know what the total workforce population is, but yet that's a significant chunk of your employees, especially when the ones most layoffs thus far at the technical center, which is where you have all the brains of the operations, as far as the designers, the engineers. And so I've actually been in that building a couple of times doing some work there. And it's interesting because it's a melting pot of a variety of people from all over the planet that come to our country pursuing the American dream. And they come over here with various skill sets to work in the manufacturing sector. And I believe those people are being hit hard right now because, they had an opportunity to take a buyout several months ago, but I would imagine it wasn't as clear as to what departments or what sectors was going to be downsized. So it was one of them things where it's 50-50 as to whether you should probably take it or not. But when you get something, I'm sure email wise or your supervisor mentioned that we could be on the chopping blocks, I imagine it's not a good feeling to have to go home and tell your wife or tell your children that, hey, we might have to cut back a little bit, might have to slow down a little bit and not take this trip or do that. So you got to adjust your life. And it's all based upon the idea that your livelihood comes through a company that is not experiencing the growth that they need in order to be profitable. So it's all about profitability these days. And with this global slowdown, I believe it's underway right now. I think it's going to be more than just a manufacturing base. Automotive wise, it's going to be impacted.
We got a little taste of this recently here in the DC area with the government shutdown. The major difference being that these employees were only going to go without pay while the government was shut down. Ultimately, they would be given everything they would have earned had the government been opened. But you still would have thought that this was the end of the world here outside the greater DC area. People, all these stories of, people already going to soup kitchens and things like that, food pantries just to make ends meet. But in the situation you're describing, this is permanent. These folks are suddenly going to be out of work and looking for work either in Detroit or somewhere else. Yeah. Do you know anyone who happens to be affected by this? And if you don't, what do you think will be the long run effects of this as one by one these employees start to get laid off?
Right. Well, I have a good friend of mine, actually a former teammate of mine, from yesteryears. And he's an employee of GM. And so he's on the executive side. So he's one of the guys that are a little bit higher up. And so just in having a casual conversation with him several weeks ago, I think it was probably before the new year. And we were small talking. Most of his family has already relocated down south just by choice. And I was inquired as to whether or not, he would be joining them. And his first remark was, hey, Mike, with this what's happening in GM, I might end up having to, to make that move now. And so to hear him say that and knowing that he's already, up at the top of the food chain there, lets me know that, even he himself being an executive or being up in that top of the building sector, he was concerned about some things. So I wasn't, shocked in the idea that if he's concerned, imagine everyone else beneath him and everyone that's actually on the floor getting dirty with their hands or whatnot, the type of emotions they might be experiencing. So I think at the end of the day, just this initial announcement, and as I always mention on my channel, is that we're just in the beginning of the year. Like, this news was given end of last year about what could be for this year, but yet to already have within the first, we are for 40 days into the new year, and to be getting these type of numbers of, roughly 4,000 or so will be laid off by the end of this month. And then slowly throughout the rest of the year, we're going to have a lot more. And then globally, they're going to be letting people go. And that's just one manufacturing company. And so we have the big three here. So I'm waiting now on some news from Ford or Chrysler or any of the tier suppliers, because once again, if you've been to Detroit, whether you are in the city of Detroit or around the suburbs, and driving along the freeway, you will see some type of tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 supplier that's here based upon the idea that they supply to the big three. And so ultimately, one of the big three have made some decisions, made some changes on a small scale. What happens if we have two more type of announcements from the other two of this big three chain? Then that's going to be very problematic, because once again, wherever Detroit goes, the nation goes, I believe. So yeah, it's all interconnected in my opinion.
Well, it's funny. This is an important topic. This isn't the primary topic you talk about on your show. Your show is called Rethinking the Dollar. The dollar is the primary topic you talk about. But I think it's important to talk about the U.S. auto market, because it was only bailed out less than 10 years ago. Ford, I don't think Ford received any bailout money, but certainly GM did. And that's why they got the nickname Government Motors. Or maybe you want to chime in.
Yeah, and so I'm not sure exactly who received what, because I wasn't rethinking the dollar at that point. I was still in my younger years, and so it was as a result of all that, I began asking questions and rethinking a lot of things. But just off the top of my head, without being sure about it, I want to say that Ford didn't need any assistance, but as a part of the whole idea of just making sure everyone is liquidated or well liquidated, I believe they were kind of pressured into taking something, or I don't know if they actually did, but I remember hearing news around here that the government was saying we're supplying all these funds. We need you to take them so that it looks like it's evenly distributed and we're not just favoring one company. So I kind of get the vibe that I kind of got that in mind from years past. So I'm not sure how it all played out. But at the end of the day, we had a recession, which led to our manufacturing, the big three, or one or two of the big three, having issues of where they needed government assistance. And the government became the owner of a private company in the Motor City, and they, paid them back slowly but surely. But yet it was like a even trade. It wasn't like they actually profited off of buying a Motor City, one of the companies here, and selling them back throughout the time frame. But at the end of the day, it's the idea that it was a recession. They needed help. So right now, if we're supposed to be in an economic expansion still, or whatever the mainstream news would have us believe, what's going to happen during the next slowdown? And so a part of this restructuring plan is because they're slowing down. Like, sales aren't what they used to be. And I'm assuming it's the same way in the DC area, but yet you can go anywhere along any major road and see something about easy credit. We have so many car dealerships, used car sales places, that it's like, I'm wondering who actually has the funds to go to these lots and buy these newer cars or even used cars. And so, yeah, we have too many supply. We have too large of a supply of cars and not enough able buyers at the end of the day. So that's going to be an issue, because everyone now, every commercial on TV, I'm sure, as you see, is finance this, lease this. I mean, I think we're coming to a point where people are waking up and realizing that perhaps it might not be the best thing to go into debt this current time, if your job isn't as secure as you might believe or want to think it is. So.
Well, yeah, and your car payment certainly shouldn't be as big as your rent or mortgage payment. And I think a lot of people have gotten in over their heads. They've got their vehicle financed out to 7 years, 8 years. Some of these programs will let you finance it for a time period where the car probably will be worthless by the time you pay off the note. But we just got into this whole subject last week with Chris Rossini and Chris Casey, talking about Austrian economics, the consequences of the boom bust cycle, malinvestment, misallocation of resources. And it's my position, Mike, that really the government shouldn't have bailed out the auto market, as tough as it would have been. Make these companies restructure, really trim down, become a going concern. Don't sell products that people don't necessarily want. I think that would have been better for everyone in the long run. And really, if they propped them up just say in 2008, 2009, and here we are only 10 years later and they're having problems again. Who's to say that they won't need a bailout again? And what is the consequence going to be from that as far as the public is concerned? I don't think they're going to be as enthusiastic to see these companies get another chance at success while the average person is struggling to make ends meet.
Right. And I think in this next slowdown, or as I've mentioned on my channel before, I believe the recession is now, depending on what indicators you look at. I mean, we have so many economists out here that say this index, that index, this whatever graph show you this. So from all the graphs I've looked at over the last year and the interviews I've had on my channel, I've kind of come to the conclusion that, we're currently in an economic global slowdown. So it's more apparent now when you have all these companies restructuring, and then you have retail stores around the country closing. So I did a video not long ago. It was like labeled the top 20 retail stores closing this year alone, and I went through the list, and from 20 all the way down to number one. Number one was like 300, 400 stores. So that lets me know that things are not as good as they would like for us to believe. And so with those fictitious numbers of the job reports, and you have all these unemployment numbers, I'm starting to wonder exactly, do they actually believe those numbers, or are they just telling us that because it's one of them things you got to keep going? Because we're clearly out of the boom phase. We're entering the bust phase. And then when it comes down to making it official, it's always 2 quarters or so behind according to their own measurements. So I would probably be willing to say that, probably beginning of 2020 or so, they're going to say, yeah, we entered a recession, this time frame now. But yet at that point, that's when the market's going to react and everyone's going to start panicking. So, one of the big things I tell people now is brace for impact now. You should have been prepared yesterday, as far as, just having some of the basic things that how, according to what you're able to do with where you're at financially. Just brace, prepare, save, and enjoy this time right here, because I believe this next 5 to 10 years will not be as enjoyable as it is now, especially when we were younger, Phil. So yeah, enjoy these moments, man. So I try to tell my children that, like, daddy, does the best he can for you guys. Appreciate these things, because I believe your future, I hope it's bright as your current situation now, but who knows?
I've got a friend in Venezuela. He's been on the show before. I know you talk about Venezuela all the time because it's a great case study in what happens when a socialist regime starts to fail. He's informed me that his brother, who's been down there for years, he owns many franchises, is finally going to move this year, take his family to Spain, and they're done. So that's ultimately what happens. And I'm afraid that eventually it will come here, because we're making a lot of the same mistakes that Venezuela has made, not to that degree, but the laws of economics still apply to us. So I think that's sound advice. And I think there will be a wealth transfer. I thought we would have had it by now. In my book, my little ebook, Financial Judo, I thought, we'd see maybe a Dow gold ratio of 1-to-1 by now, just kind of a back of the cocktail napkin type thing. But, you're in good company, Mike, because I've heard Eric Sprott say things similar to yourself. Where Detroit goes, so goes the nation. And I got a little photo here I want to share. I'm sure you've seen stuff like this before. It's very artsy and very poignant. These are like Detroit photos where it's then and now, right? You've seen this before, right?
Yeah.
This is a Packard plant, and it's got the black and white photo overlaid what it currently looks like today. And maybe this was taken like 10 years ago or something like that. Yeah. But when you see this, and when you're talking about these very serious things, like what kind of images does this conjure up for you? I mean, you're living up there, you're driving by these places like the photo I showed earlier. I mean, what could happen? This is scary, serious stuff. And I know you're trying to warn people.
Yeah, it's very frightening in regards to the idea that most people are still asleep at the wheel. So most people don't know that the things that are happening around them. And so one of the biggest things that really I feel inspired and led to do is the idea of waking up as many Main Street individuals as I can. And so especially in my city, Detroit, like this year, one of my biggest big initiatives, rather, is to actually get out in the streets. So this spring coming up, I'm going to be going door to door in a sense of like I'm running for some type of campaign and giving people material and flyers, just because I feel like I kind of feel like it's my responsibility, given the fact that I've been put in a position to be aware of some things. I don't have all the solutions or all the answers, but that's not my job. I'm just a messenger. So if I could tap someone on the shoulder and say, hey, man, this is happening around you. What are your thoughts on this? And how do you feel about this? Just to get people to think. And if I can do that, then I believe the Holy Spirit, once again, I have to go spiritual, but I believe the Holy Spirit will then do his job as far as preparing people mentally, spiritually, leading them to the Lord at this current time. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be, where's your faith at? Everyone's faith will be tested, and so right now, depending on where you're at spiritually, you might want to, just literally buckle down and in prayer or whatnot, which is one of my little models of, spend more time in prayer now when things are good, so that when things aren't good, you should be spiritually strong to be able to handle some things. But I think that this upcoming shift of just the world powers, that's what this is. But basically boils down to, the Eastern allies or Eastern friends or whoever we want to call them, Russia and China. We all know what they're doing behind the scenes, and even now it's becoming more primary news of what they're developing and what they're preparing for. They know what's coming. Problem is, people on this side of the planet don't, on average rather. And so, me personally, I feel like it's my responsibility to at least reach one person a day. And so coming up this year, I'm going to make more of an initiative to get out there and help people and just point people towards, other people. It doesn't have to be Rethinking the Dollar. It could be anybody, So Phil, you might get some calls because people need help out here. So we are in a great position to be able to educate people just because, we're aware, we're awake, and we're watching. So definitely this year, is a time to get more involved in the city. That's what I plan on doing.
Yeah, I definitely admire your attitude and your spiritual preparedness. I mean, I'll be honest, I find myself getting very frustrated even during the government shutdown and just finding out that my neighbors and colleagues and friends had suddenly had to go to the food pantry, right? And it's like, gosh, I'm trying to share what I can. I'm trying to reach out. And that's really how this all started, because I feel like, just like you, Mike, we owe it to our neighbor to get the word out about this stuff. And it's not even necessarily about, personal remuneration or anything like that. It's really about, like, this is a serious problem that we're facing as a country, and it's potentially going to get a whole lot worse. Let's shift to the dollar just real quick, because I mean, when your show is named Rethinking the Dollar, you've had so many great guests on, you've learned from the best. What do you think is your best nugget of wisdom as it pertains to the dollar?
As it pertains to the dollar, and it's first thing to come to mind based upon that question is just the infamous phrase or the quote that let me see, I'm drawing a blank as to who said it, but yeah, once I say it, you want to know what I'm talking about. The fact that all fiat currencies return to their intrinsic value of zero. And so that right there, to me, sums it all up. And so I often reference that out of all the studying I've done and the countries I've had a privilege to be able to go to and currencies, because I'm a big currency collector of all of archaic currencies and whatnot. It's, historical artifacts now. And so like all the currencies, places or whatever, every country has come to the realization at some point that their government has made too many promises. They can't pay for them. So the only thing they can do is monetize their bonds and whatever they want to do to try to prop things up by printing. And so every currency apart from the Federal Reserve note, has had its day of reckoning. And so that basically says that 99.99% of currencies have all been either devalued, redenominated, or just hyperinflated away completely, except the Federal Reserve note. So my question will be to you is, what's the chance, or would you be willing to take that 0.0001% chance in thinking that it will not happen to the Federal Reserve note, also known as a dollar? And so just position that, and then you show the consumer dollar graph as well, let you know we're not working with much purchasing power anyway, but we're still in a better position than the majority of the people around this planet, because the dollar is still of value at this current point because of its reserve status. But that's all changing. But the idea that 0.0001% chance of it failing will happen in our lifetime.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is going to happen. Yeah, I think it is going to happen. Yeah, and Tom Woods talks about the fact all the time that if you make $35,000 a year, you're in the top 1% internationally. That really is astounding. I mean, the average person is living on less than $5 a day. Meanwhile, our national debt continues to skyrocket here. We're approaching 22 trillion. And that does not even include many of the promises that you were referring to there, Mike. Absolutely. Medicare, Social Security, all that stuff. It's totally unfunded.
Yeah. Now, and speaking of just our issues, I was talking to a friend actually yesterday, and so he's from Turkey. And so I was just inquiring about the lira and his thoughts on his President Erdogan there. And so, I was letting him know, because he doesn't know that I, mentioned this type of things, so I was just trying to pick his brain from just a non-biased standpoint. But at the end of the day, this gentleman here that I'm referring to was born and raised in Turkey, moved here. He works for one of the car manufacturers, so happened. Him and his wife both do. And they're, a little bit higher up. So they're not, they're not designer engineers type of thing. So But yeah, and just talking and hearing his story, he has the similar experiences that we have on this side, but yet it's just from a different perspective. And he was talking about how he doesn't like Erdogan and how the government's concerned to him. That's why he came here, and the Turkish lira is a problem. And so, just having that conversation lets me know that everyone in every country has some stories to tell about how their government is handling or mismanaging their responsibility of being stewards of the nation's currency, as well as overseers of policy and things of that nature. They completely abuse that to the point we're all in the same boat. So it's no running or escaping something that's just interconnected, because the system itself, the policies that have been implemented, are what we're going to experience as being the biggest problems to society and to the world, really.
Yeah, I think every politician intuitively wants to promise something for nothing, but ultimately they run out of the dough to pay for it. And like I said, there with my friend's brother who's going to leave Venezuela, right? I mean, he's going to take his future tax dollars with him. So they all pay a price eventually. Folks can find Mike at rethinkingthedollar.com. Where else can they look for you, Mike? I know you're on Twitter. You got a growing YouTube channel. I've put the link there in the description box below. Where can folks find you, and what positive message do you want to leave everyone with tonight?
Well, Phil, appreciate you once again for having me on your show. It's always a pleasure to connect with you, my friend. We have a lot in common as far as us being younger guys with families and whatnot, and we're all in this together to educate people. So appreciate you taking time to have me on. And so as far as finding Rethinking the Dollar, I think at this point now, if you type in Rethinking the Dollar, I pretty much try to put the channel everywhere. So every type of social media platform, I think I'm on there. If I'm not, please let me know. I'll try to get on there. But primarily Twitter and YouTube, just Rethinking the Dollar, or just go to rethinkingthedollar.com and you'll find the show there. And other than that, we'd love to have you join us. And so we do live streams during the week. So I try to answer questions and share my opinions and give people a chance to call in and share their thoughts and whatnot. Because at the end of the day, we're a big community. We're a community of like-minded individuals that are aware and in tune with things. And so I think everyone has a unique voice, and not everyone has a platform to share. And so I try to make sure to be inclusive, to make sure people get a chance to share their thoughts and opinions. And so far, it's been fun. It's been a fun ride.
Good, Mike. You promised me you'll share this interview on your channel after this is all said and done.
We'll do that. I'm gonna give you credit. I'm gonna share the video and give you credit for it, and then we'll definitely help you get where you're trying to go, my friend. I appreciate you for taking time for me.
Well, thank you so much. And we've got more guests lined up this week, Mike. We've got Naomi Brockwell and Chris Coney coming on Wednesday at noon to talk about crypto education as well as internet censorship, two hot topics. John and I will be back at it again on Thursday night, live, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we're doing things just like Mike, getting great guests lined up. But definitely subscribe to Mike's channel. Tune in live. You're going to learn a lot. And where Detroit goes, so goes the nation. So I think it's an important message. Mike, thanks so much for coming back on the show. Until Wednesday at noon. See you later, everybody.
Appreciate it.